From 2002 to 2016, I built up my family tree on Ancestry.com using census records, travel, and some good old-fashioned Googling. I found some surprising characters and some interesting stories I thought I'd share. So back in the day, my dad mentioned that he'd read an article that Ellis Island had started making their records available on their website, and he thought his grandpa came through there. When I found the record, I was surprised to see that he was only 5 years old traveling with his family on the Lusitania of all ships. What I was able to gather that his dad was worried about the war and wanted to move his family. But this didn't stop his oldest son from turning right around and going up to Canada, enlisting there. Unfortunately, he died in the first few weeks of fighting. In addition to the name and the ship circumstances, and the fact that the whole family was together, it also listed a previous address in Liverpool. It was at that point that after a bit of research, I found there was a way to access British census records, which were taken every 10 years, but you had to get an ancestry.com.uk account. So I signed up. Through the census records, I was able to match up where the family members were and when, and eventually track them slowly moving out of a town outside of Manchester called Tarporley. So in 2014, when Norelle and I were road tripping across the UK, we decided to stay a night in Tarporley to see if we could find any trace of the family. I also used my Freemason connections and reached out to a lodge to let them know we'd be in town and I'd love to get a drink or something. They asked to pick me up at the Swan Hotel, which I think is the only hotel, and to be dressed in full suit. It just happened that I had come on their meeting night, which is only once a quarter, and the Farmers Lodge apparently also has a table lodge at all of their meetings because of the frequency. Their table lodges are a lot like ours, just more British. While at dinner, the guy who picked me up was essentially a volunteer town historian. He told me that he had lots of records about my family who used to be master foresters of the Forest of Delamere, and that they have a large estate called Uckington. At one point, he took me out to the balcony and said, "See everything on the other side of the road over there? That's Uckington, and it used to belong to your family for 600 years." The most intriguing story of those 600 years seems to have been the invention of fox hunting as a sport, after King James I hunted with my ancestor John Doane. Apparently, he knighted him because he had such a good time and the sport caught on with the rest of England. The Tarporley Hunt Club is patronized by the monarch, or in this case, her appointee, Prince Charles, who still shows up from time to time, apparently. The Hunt Club gave the village pride and resources to have a strong sense of self and community. I noticed their town square sports plaques of every year they won Best Kept Village in England. It was a lot. I know it was a backup choice, but that's got to be a factor why Russell Wilson and Sierra chose to get married at Pickford Castle on the south side of the village. When we went back inside, he started telling me about how during the wars, most of the old halls and their valuables were sold off to the highest bidder, and among which was a special horn that was called the Horn of Delamere, and the symbol of the Master Forester, and was the horn of the Hunt Club. So when it came up for auction again, the town had to pull together to buy the horn off the market for the museum. Together they raised something in the ballpark of £17,000 out of a town of 2,600 people. The next morning, Norelle and I wandered around town, which was only about 2 blocks, and found our way to the churchyard, where it seemed nearly a quarter of the gravestones had Doane etched in them. As we went around the back, we found the Doane Room Preschool, and once we found the doorknob twisted the other way on the church, we found Doane effigies, busts, and stained glass windows inside. We met up with the old mason for breakfast because he wanted to bring us documents and books, which I later used to piece together my family tree to cover those 600 years from 1791 to the 1180s. He also wanted us to go on a short drive with him to see what's left of Uckington Hall up north. Uckington Hall is a Class 1 historical site which was bought up by a dairy farmer in the early 1900s, and his 89-year-old son still manages it today. We didn't get a chance to meet him, but we had a quick look around at what's apparently just a quarter of the building it used to be. Just for fun, over the course of the next 2 years, I priced out how much it would cost and what the process would be to restore the building and turn it into a bed and breakfast. Surprisingly, it'd only be about $800,000, or not dollars, pounds to buy, and probably about 1.2 to 1.5 million pounds to fix up. If only I had that much hanging around, I'd totally do it. After I got home and started polishing the family tree and matching up with what I had on paper with what I can find online, my family tree grew very tall. I finally arrived at Henry Doane from the late 1000s. That's where my official paperwork ran cold. However, after asking around both in Tarporley, online, and at the Edinburgh Museum, which also had pieces of Uckington's lost goods, it seems likely that the Dones could have been moved from their home up north at Doane Castle by William the Conqueror, and that there are some parts of the Domesday Book that actually do support this. Doane Castle is the second castle to stand on its location. The original was a Roman fortress that was built to be an outpost beyond Hadrian's Wall. The name literally means high hill or fortress in the local Gaelic dialect. The current castle was built in the 1400s and was used to manufacture muskets for much of its life, including the musket that fired the shot that was heard around the world in the American Revolution. Today, it's most famous for its versatility as a medieval castle set, being the filming location for Monty Python's Quest for the Holy Grail and Winterfell in Game of Thrones. I joke that the reason why we say Doane instead of Dun is because we're from the north of the wall, so you have to talk like Jon Snow. It's Doane. Anyway, it works with some crowds, not others. Anyway, because the connection to the castle and the name origin was mostly circumstantial, I wanted to see how far back I could go on a firmer footing. So I figured I needed to find a way into the Norman line, because the native British records would be next to non-existent before 1066. I soon found out that Henry Doane married Joan Kingsley around 1220. She was a line that was started by William the Conqueror's aunt, Alice, and her marriage. As William's aunt, her fathers going back 6 generations were all Dukes of Normandy, going back to Robert I, or otherwise famously known as Rollo before he converted, after taking northern France by force as a Viking. However, Vikings, like ancient Scots, weren't exactly known for their exact record keeping. So I looked for another path to go further up the tree. At this point, we're dealing with the Dukes of Normandy, so I started using Wikipedia as a source to build the tree, as well as simple research on Google. Rollo's son William apparently married Sporta of Sinless, who was the great-great-granddaughter of Charlemagne. Now, I heard that nearly all Europeans are descended from Charlemagne, so to double check, I also built out an Earl's family tree, now using the same methods I just talked about, and it totally checks out. We're like 60th cousins. It's okay, because like everybody is. Don't worry about it. I could have been there, but I took another day or two to see how far the rabbit hole I could go by building this tree using what I can find online. So just using public information, I started to add through Charlemagne's line wherever it would take me, which was first to a few kings of Italy in the 700s, then mayors in France in the 600s, kings of Cologne in the 500s, Frankish chiefs in the 300 to 200s, a line of Roman senators in the 100s to about the zeros, to a regent king of Galatia in the 1st century BC, who married a princess who was the great-great-granddaughter of Silius Nector, or Nicator, who was the commander, or a commander in Alexander's army. Apparently a pretty prominent one, because he married a woman named Ampa, who was a princess of Persia, which was, of course, conquered by Alexander. Following her direct ancestors, we go through the kings of Persia in the 300 to 600 BC range, and also the kings of Elam, the kings of the Medes, including a particular one who married an Ethiopian princess in the 700 or the 7th century BC. And legend has it that she was the daughter of Cassiopeia, who was the daughter of Zeus. So that's about it. I didn't spend much more time than that, other than just checking back, this whole list as a record, and I look at it as reference. It was a fun project from years ago, and a good set of party conversations. I think really everybody should dig into their family history. It's a great way to feel connection with the past, even if you're just casually enjoying history through movies and TV. It certainly gives great context.